Welcome to Straight Up Sports, the podcast YouTube channel. Yes, I'm back. It's been a long time. It's been nearly 3.5 years since I've done a video or an audio, and I decided I'm going to bring this back. I love talking sports with anybody, and for me, this is a great opportunity and a platform for me to show my opinions, but also get your opinions as well. Please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it if you guys all shared with all your friends, your family, coworkers, whoever you want to share it with. I would greatly appreciate the opportunity. Now, just to give you a little background on the show, my name is Andrew. I started this back in 2018. Stopped doing it when COVID started because I had COVID when it first came out. It took me a long time to get back to this point. A lot of things have happened. Life happened. I moved. So a lot of different things have gone on along the way. The reason I'm bringing this back is because like I said, I love talking sports with anybody. It could be a brick wall. It could be a person. It could be a 5-year-old. I just love talking about it. It's my passion. I don't do it for a living, but, it's a passion that I love. And, I figured I'd give it another shot on YouTube. I did it through Anchor, which was an app done by Spotify. And viewership was not as great as I would have liked it to have been. And I think with YouTube, there's a better shot of that happening. So on the pod, I'm just going to set a couple of ground rules. Number one, we're only going to talk sports. If you want something else, my suggestion is go somewhere else. We're going to be discussing all the major sports, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, college football, college basketball, PGA Tour, and a lot more. Like I said, it's going to be non-political. We're not going to talk about celebrities. We're not going to talk about who these guys are dating. We're not going to be talking about any of that stuff. We're mostly just going to be discussing the outcomes on the field. There will be off the field stuff, I'm sure, that will be discussed that brings value to the channel. But for the most part, it'll be about what's on the field. And then also, obviously, trade deadlines and that kind of stuff will be discussed when we get to that point. Obviously, the major story has been the NFL, obviously, so that's what we'll talk about today. Another ground rule is I don't know when I'm going to have guests on. So please do not ask me to come on the show. Please do not ask me when I'm creating videos. I have no idea. I don't have a set schedule. I don't know when this is going to happen again. It's very hard with time because I do have a full-time job and a social life, so it's pretty hard to find an hour or two to make this work. I'll do my best, but I don't plan on bringing guests on the show anytime soon. I need to get the channel off the ground first in order for that to happen. So it's going to take some time. So just understand that it's nothing personal. Don't be offended. It's just that's what I feel is best for the channel. So again, we're going to talk football today. If you're not into football, find another video. It's not going to be anything else. And like I said, if you like the videos and you want more, like and subscribe, share it with all your friends. I'd love the feedback, positive or negative, doesn't matter. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of negative feedback and plenty of positive feedback both ways. So let's discuss football, shall we? So the NFL season, we are now in the playoffs. And this is a big time of the year, not only for content creators, but for football players where they make their money. And there's been a lot of news, obviously, the last, 2-3 days. But I want to go back to the beginning of the season. Expectations were high for a lot of teams. A lot. Buffalo, Miami, the Jets, Baltimore, Cincinnati, just to name a few. And now some teams meet expectations and some don't. That's the nature of sports. That's why we love it. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. I'll start in the AFC East. So in football, there are 2 conferences, the AFC and the NFC, 4 divisions, 7 playoff teams. 4 division winners, 3 wild cards. So I'll start in the AFC with the East. If we go back to the beginning of the year, we remember that Buffalo was the favorite to win the AFC East, with quarterback Josh Allen, head coach Sean McDermott, and wide receiver Stephon Diggs leading the way, and their defense, led by Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White, and others. Buffalo was expected to be a Super Bowl contender this year. Unfortunately for them, it was a rough start. But then all of a sudden, they've now won 5 straight and find themselves hosting a playoff game. As opposed to the Miami Dolphins, who acquired Tyreek Hill. They were a very good team, very highly thought after offensive team, and they decided to maybe choke. I mean, you could call it choking. They didn't play well the last 6 games, and they found themselves in the number 6 spot in the playoffs, going on the road to Kansas City. Then let's get to the New York Jets. I am a fan of the Jets. I've been a fan my whole life, started with Chad Pennington and Curtis Martin, and worked my way up now to Aaron Rodgers and the debacle that is the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers, 4 snaps in, his season ended with a torn Achilles. So instead of talking about football, maybe giving us an update as to when he was going to come back, and he had given us that update a little bit. He had told us that maybe week 16 he would come back, but it was all a fluke. He was never coming back. The Jets were never in serious consideration to make the playoffs because Joe Douglas kissed Aaron Rodgers' feet by not getting a backup quarterback. Aaron Rodgers wants to come in as a savior and a hero of New York. Meanwhile, he just looks like an absolute clown. The Jets will have an opportunity next season to potentially be a playoff team. It doesn't get any easier in the AFC. Robert Saleh keeps his job as well as Joe Douglas, and Woody Johnson, the owner, is giving them a mulligan. Honestly, it's a mistake. They need to fire their whole coaching staff, they need to get rid of their GM, and send a message to Aaron Rodgers loud and clear that you are not bigger than the organization. You're one player. Yes, you're a Hall of Fame player. Yes, you play quarterback. But you've only appeared in 1 Super Bowl in your career, and it's probably one of the most underachieving careers in NFL history, based on the talent that he has. And the New York Jets this year finished 7-10 and came up short. Again, they have not made the playoffs since 2010, and it has been a massive struggle for them. And now they go into another offseason of hope that Aaron Rodgers will play a full year and get the Jets back into the playoffs for the first time since 2010. Then there's New England, a team that coming into the year didn't have a lot of talent on their roster. There are major, major issues. From quarterback to running back to receiver. They brought in Ezekiel Elliott, didn't work out for them. Mac Jones stayed at the quarterback, got benched several times. Bailey Zappi looks like a backup at best in this league. And now Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft have, quote, mutually parted ways. There wasn't anything mutual. Okay? Bill Belichick believes he could still coach in this league, and Robert Kraft thought time had passed, and it was time to get younger at the head coaching position. So they hired Jerod Mayo, who apparently was the successor to Belichick, according to reports saying that in his contract, he was going to be the guy no matter what. So Mike Vrabel, who got fired in Tennessee, was never going to be the head coach. It was always going to be Jerod Mayo. A lot of people in that organization think very highly of him. And it'll be interesting to see how they approach the personnel decisions. Does Jerod Mayo have any say in it? Because right now, Belichick was the GM. He's not there anymore, and they're going to have to either hire a GM or they're going to let Jerod Mayo make decisions. I don't love that for Jerod. I think he just needs to coach. They need to hire a personnel decision maker. And we'll see what happens. But I was shocked when they said they might not hire a GM until after the draft. Kind of tells me Robert Kraft is in total control. He's in total control. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't. He's a great owner. He obviously wants to go to the Hall of Fame. Hasn't been put on the ballot. But at the same time, you have to do what's best for your team. And what's best for their team is to hire a GM. Somebody who understands personnel. Because right now, let's face it, they lack talent on their roster. They don't have the talent. They have no talent at the quarterback position. They're all backups. They have no talent at the running back position. They're all backups. No talent at the receiver position. They're all backups. So at this point, the Patriots are an issue. They're one of the least talented teams in the league, and that's why they have the 3rd overall pick in the draft. We'll see what happens when we get to the draft. Will they take a quarterback, or will they take Marvin Harrison Jr.? Will they take an offensive lineman? Will they trade backwards and potentially get themselves more draft capital because they just don't have the talent? Everybody approaches it differently, but at the end of the day, the Patriots need talent, as I've stated many times. So, to recap the AFC East, Buffalo won it on the last day, beating Miami in Miami. So, Buffalo acquired the 2 seed in the playoffs. The 6 seed went to the Miami Dolphins. After they lost 3 of 5, they still managed to make themselves a playoff team. The New York Jets and the New England Patriots did not make it this year. Let's go to the AFC North. The Baltimore Ravens, they dominated the AFC this year. They owned the number 1 seed and basically had 2 weeks off. The last week of the season didn't matter for them, and this week they didn't play at all. Lamar Jackson looks like he's probably going to win his 2nd MVP. The big question I have for Baltimore is, who's going to run the ball for them other than Lamar Jackson? Can Justice Hill and those guys prove that they're legit? We know their defense will show up, and we know they might miss Mark Andrews now more than before because the tight end is a quarterback's best friend. I still like the Ravens to win the Super Bowl at the end of the day. They have the best player on the field every game. Then the Cleveland Browns found their way into the playoffs. Deshaun Watson gets hurt halfway through the year. Joe Flacco comes off the couch and takes the Browns to the playoffs. The Browns finished, I believe, 11-6 on the season. And they got to go on the road to Houston in a playoff game, which we'll discuss in a little bit. Kevin Stefanski deserves a lot of credit for the rotation of quarterbacks from Deshaun Watson to Dorian Thompson-Robinson to Joe Flacco to P.J. Walker. Just a lot of credit has to go to him. And remember, they also lost Nick Chubb. Got hurt a couple of games in, maybe it was even the first game of the season, got hurt. And they had to go to the backups. And I thought David Njoku, the tight end, was fabulous. Amari Cooper, very good as well. And their defense, led by Myles Garrett, proved that they were for real with Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator. And the Browns found themselves in a playoff spot. Then there was Pittsburgh. I thought they had one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL on their team in Kenny Pickett. But their defense, led by Minkah Fitzpatrick and T.J. Watt, continued to show why Pittsburgh is who they are. Now, Pittsburgh has talent on the offensive side. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Pat Freiermuth, as well as Jaylen Warren. But the thing Pittsburgh kept coming back to was they had ineffective QB play. Then Kenny Pickett got hurt. And everyone's like, okay, now there's an opportunity. And remember, they also fired Matt Canada, their offensive coordinator. But unfortunately for them, Mitchell Trubisky came in and absolutely pooped himself. So they went to Mason Rudolph, who I thought was the best quarterback on their roster, but they kept him as the 3rd string. He comes out, he wins the last 3 games, and the Steelers end up as the 7 seed thanks to the gift that Jacksonville gave them. Now, next is the Cincinnati Bengals. They lose Joe Burrow for the year to a wrist injury after he had already injured his calf. Joe Burrow was injured all year, and then Jake Browning came in, the 23-year-old kid from Washington. He comes in, he figures it out, and they actually finished over 500. Give Jake Browning credit. Actually, Jake Browning's 27. Let me correct myself there. Give him credit. Okay? He was with Washington. He was with Washington University, UW. He was all over the place, signed with the Vikings as an undrafted free agent, and had to come in because Joe Burrow was injured. Season ending. He comes in, he keeps them alive, but unfortunately they came up short. We'll see what happens to him this offseason. Maybe a team takes a chance on him. So to recap that division, the Ravens were the 1 seed in the AFC, the Browns were the 5 seed, and the Steelers were the 7, and the Bengals did not make it this year. Let's go to the AFC South. This was probably the craziest division all year. You had Jacksonville, who was a heavy, heavy favorite. With Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, they added Calvin Ridley from Atlanta, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and then their defense. Had some young talent, but we knew the defense was probably the weakest part of their team, led by head coach Doug Peterson. Then you had the Colts with Anthony Richardson, who ended up getting hurt, had surgery, and then they brought in Gardner Minshew, and he took off and gave the Colts a chance to make the playoffs under first-year head coach Shane Steichen. Then you have Houston led by rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud and first-year head coach DeMeco Ryans, with Devin Singletary at running back and also Nico Collins at receiver, and they also drafted Will Anderson. Houston looked like a potential team that could make some noise, but maybe they were just too young. And then Tennessee, who continuously screwed up the draft with guys like Will Levis, Malik Willis, Treylon Burks. Really, the only talent they had on their team was Derrick Henry, DeAndre Hopkins, and Simmons. That's it. Tennessee was nothing. So it came down to the last game of the season. Jacksonville beats Tennessee, the Jags are in, and win the AFC South. If they lose, Pittsburgh got in. And sure enough, Jacksonville choked again, and they lost to Tennessee. So, what did it mean for both teams? Well, the Jaguars missed the playoffs. It was the biggest disappointment in the AFC. And it wasn't even a doubt. It was a massive disappointment for them. Massive. You know, it's a team led by a first overall quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. Granted, that quarterback class was not great. First overall pick, and again, they come up short. So Houston played Indianapolis. Winner got in and won the AFC South. And Houston survived a drop pass on a screen, and Houston ended up getting home field advantage for the first playoff game, where they took on the Cleveland Browns. For the Colts, while it was a disappointing ending, it was a heck of a year for Shane Steichen in year one. Got to give him a lot of credit. Anthony Richardson looks like a star when he comes back and if he can stay on the field. Gardner Minshew proved he can absolutely be a starting quarterback eventually. You know, maybe a stopgap. But he definitely has earned himself a nice new contract this offseason. As for the Titans, they fired their head coach Mike Vrabel after 2 unsuccessful years. I was shocked they fired him. I honestly thought that Mike Vrabel should have stayed and they should have fired the GM for all the poor decision-making they made throughout the draft. But unfortunately, Mike Vrabel wasn't his hire, and now Vrabel's out of a job. I do think there's a good chance Vrabel ends up in Seattle with the Seahawks, and we'll get to them later. Tennessee's in a big rebuild. I'm not sure how attractive this job is right now. We know they're going to interview Dan Quinn, who could absolutely get the job, even though I wouldn't hire him after what happened yesterday. But we'll see what happens with the Titans. As for the Texans, like I said, they hosted Cleveland, and they're on to the divisional round. So to recap the AFC South, Houston ended up winning the division and got in. The rest were eliminated. Let's go to the AFC West. The Kansas City Chiefs win the division again, led by who else? Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Okay. Then the Las Vegas Raiders had a very nice season. They fired head coach Josh McDaniels, and they brought in Antonio Pierce to be the interim coach. He was great. Really good. I was shocked how good he was. And now players are vouching for him to be the permanent head coach. Max Crosby even went as far to say that he would ask for a trade if Antonio Pierce didn't get the job. Ultimately, I think he gets the job because nobody wants the Raider job except Antonio Pierce. As for the Denver Broncos, it was a weird season for them. Russell Wilson, still the starting QB. They hire Sean Payton from Fox. Sean comes in, pays Jarrett Stidham, the backup, a lot of money. And now Russell Wilson will be on a new team next year as Sean Payton benched Russell Wilson for the last few games of the season. I didn't love the way Denver handled it, and I still have questions. What's Denver's plan going forward at the quarterback position? Because it's not Jarrett Stidham, and you made it clear it's not Russ. Is it going to be a veteran quarterback like a Kirk Cousins? Or are you just going to go into the draft and try to draft a kid and develop him? That's something historically that Denver hasn't done well. As for the Chargers, it was a massive failure of a season. They finally fired Brandon Staley, who was well overdue to go. Justin Herbert fractured his finger, missed the last few games, but at that point, it didn't matter. This is a roster that's aging. They have good individual talent like Herbert, Eckler, Keenan Allen, Joey Bosa, and Khalil Mack. But they're an aging group, and they need to be competitive now. They have an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert, who I think is slightly overrated, but when given the right coach, I think he can be a superstar in this league. There are a lot of smoke and mirrors right now that Jim Harbaugh will take the job with the Chargers. If that's the case, they will vault all the way up the Vegas odds boards to potentially be a Super Bowl pick next year. I don't know if Jim Harbaugh will take the job. He loves Michigan. He did everything he could at Michigan. But he can dominate college football for years to come. So he's got to ask himself, does he want to dominate at Michigan with sanctions likely coming? Or does he want to try to do something that a lot of coaches haven't done? Win at the college level and win at the pro level. His brother already has one, potentially going to get two this year. So we'll see what decision Jim Harbaugh makes. He is expected to interview with the Chargers this week. So to recap the AFC West, the Chiefs were the only team that made it. Now, the AFC in general, the four division winners, the Bills, the Ravens, the Texans, and the Chiefs. The three wildcard spots, the Browns, the Dolphins, and the Steelers. So now we get to this weekend. Buffalo is playing Pittsburgh later on today. This game was supposed to be played yesterday, but it got canceled due to weather. The field looks like it's in very good shape. Fans are probably going to have to shovel the snow out of their own seats. But it looks like the game will be played, and Buffalo should win this game. No TJ Watt for Pittsburgh. Mason Rudolph's going to have his hands full, and they're probably going to need a career game from him to have any shot. Then you look at the 3-6 matchup, which was Kansas City hosting Miami. The Dolphins, used to playing in 80-degree weather, struggled in the cold. They lost 26-7, and Tua got outplayed. And I think the question remains, can Tua take the Dolphins to a Super Bowl? Because I'll tell you right now, home field advantage is most important. Most important for the Miami Dolphins more than any other team. Because if you have home field advantage there, you don't have to worry about playing in the cold. But the problem is, if you don't, you're going to have to go to a cold weather stadium, and that's just very tough, it seems like, for Tua. Miami was kind of a fraud this year. They had talent. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert. Unfortunately, they lost Bradley Chubb. Their defense never really was healthy this year. And Vic Fangio, you could say, underachieved as a defensive coordinator. I fully believe he'll be back. I think they want to wait till everybody gets healthy, and then they want their fair shot. As for the Chiefs, they did what they were supposed to do. They won a home playoff game, and now Mahomes could potentially be going on the road for his first career playoff game if Buffalo wins. If Houston wins, he gets to host another game. If Pittsburgh wins, he gets to host another game. Kansas City, to me, it wasn't about them in this game. It was about the Dolphins. And now we'll see, as Kansas City awaits the result of Bills Steelers, if they're going to host Houston or travel to Buffalo. Then we had the Houston-Cleveland game, which was the first game. C.J. Stroud is special with first-year head coach DeMeco Ryans. They're the first rookie duo head coach quarterback to go to the second round since the Jets with Mark Sanchez and Rex Ryan. Give Houston credit. They went in there, they dominated like they were supposed to. C.J. Stroud completely outplayed Joe Flacco as he was supposed to, and that Browns defense did not show up in this game. Cleveland had a heck of a year. No one expected them to do what they did. But next year expectations are higher because Deshaun Watson will be healthy. Congrats to the Houston Texans. They await to either go play Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, or they'll go play Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. That's the AFC. Baltimore's awaiting. Teams are waiting for the Bills-Steelers game to figure itself out. Now, that was the AFC. Now we get to talk about the NFC. We'll start in the NFC East, where everybody thought it was going to come down to Dallas and Philadelphia. It was. It did. It came down to those two teams. Philadelphia was 10-1. Everybody was picking them to go to the Super Bowl. They finished the year 11-6. Didn't end the way they wanted to. They've now lost 5 of 6. There were rumors that Sirianni, their head coach, could be out of a job. There were also rumors that Jalen Hurts didn't like the way things were going. Play calling. He wanted more control. Here's a newsflash, buddy. You haven't won a Super Bowl. You have zero power. Get over it. And now the Eagles will travel to Tampa Bay tonight with a chance to maybe right some wrongs. Or they can keep the wrongs going and they could push their head coach out of a job, which I think is what they're trying to do. I feel bad for Sirianni, but at the same time, they probably need a veteran coach at this point to get them over the hump. I do think it comes down to Dallas and Philadelphia for Bill Belichick, but as of right now, Mike McCarthy has not been fired. So right now, Mike McCarthy is still the Dallas coach, Nick Sirianni is still the Eagles coach, and we won't know that till after tonight's game against Tampa Bay. As for the other few teams in the division, the Dallas Cowboys had all the talent. Dak Prescott at quarterback, CeeDee Lamb at receiver, Tony Pollard got his real opportunity to start with Ezekiel Elliott going to New England, and of course Micah Parsons, who everyone claims is Lawrence Taylor Jr. I think we can pump the brakes now on that. Dallas had all the talent. Now they did lose Trevon Diggs early in the season to injury. Big blow for them in the secondary. But we all knew it was going to come down to what happened in the playoffs, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but boy, that was bad. Then there's the Giants, who really didn't have a quarterback all year. Daniel Jones, multiple injuries, neck, ACL. Tyrod Taylor played okay and then got hurt. And then the fighting Tommy DeVitos come out there, and he was just a short stint. The reality is they paid Daniel Jones a lot of money. He's their quarterback moving forward. They have to get him more help, and then you could see where he's at in a couple, maybe at the end of next year. We don't know if Barkley will be back as the running back. They franchise tagged him last year. I expect the same this year. Barkley just doesn't want the process to be drawn out. Guess what? They don't care what you think, Saquon. They don't care. They'll do it in August. They are in no rush. If you want to complain about the process, feel free, but no one's going to feel bad. The Giants need more talent. They have no receivers. They don't have a tight end. Their defense was okay, but their defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, didn't like the way things were being run, so he left. So now the Giants are going to have to find a new DC, obviously, and they're just going to have to figure it out as we go along. As for Washington, they fired Ron Rivera as expected. New owner Josh Harris taking over for Dan Snyder. And Washington does not have a quarterback. Sam Howell has not worked out, and Jacoby Brissett is simply a backup. We know they have talent on the offensive side. Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson, and Logan Thomas. Their defense has talent, but a lot of it was hurt this year, and their defense underperformed for sure with Jack Del Rio at the helm, and then he was fired. The rumor is that Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, is the leader in the clubhouse. It would be a little bit surprising if Josh Harris didn't go after Belichick or Harbaugh and try to offer them as much as he can. But at the end of the day, I don't see Belichick and Harbaugh taking it because it's not a big enough job for them. To me, this is Ben Johnson's name written all over it, and it gives him a chance to get a new quarterback. Now remember, they took Sam Howell. He didn't play great this year. His offensive line was terrible. He led the league in turnovers. But he went to North Carolina. Guess what? Washington has the second pick. You know where Drake May went to school? North Carolina. So potentially they could be taking back-to-back North Carolina guys, which would be interesting. I'm not totally sold on Drake May. He was on a team that was pretty average, and he didn't make them much better. Caleb Williams, while USC wasn't great, he was legit. So we'll see what Washington does at the draft. But I fully expect them to hire Ben Johnson, and I expect them to take a quarterback with the second overall pick in the draft. They're obviously not going to get Caleb Williams. They're going to be looking at somebody else. And we'll see what Josh Harris, the new owner, does in terms of spending money. So, to recap the NFC East, Dallas won the division. They were the 2 seed. Philadelphia choked the division away, became the 5 seed. The Giants and Commanders did not make the playoffs. Let's go to the NFC North. Detroit, first division winner in 30 years. Congrats to Dan Campbell, Jared Goff, and the crew. What an amazing story. They drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, traded away DeAndre Swift, and everybody was like, what are they doing? Well, they knew what they were doing. Amon-Ra St. Brown, another great season. And everyone said, why'd they get rid of TJ Hawkinson? Well, that's because they got Sam Laporta, and he's pretty good. Jared Goff improved under offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who's in the mix for a lot of jobs, just like Washington, like I said earlier. Then you get to the Green Bay Packers, a team that was supposed to be in a rebuild, with Jordan Love, who everybody thought was awful. Well, the Packers came in, and now they're going to the divisional round of the playoffs, and Jordan Love looks like a star. The Packers are 8-3 in their last 11 games, including the playoff game they just won. Jordan Love is playing at an elite level. You got to give him credit, as well as Matt LaFleur. Aaron Jones is healthy finally for them, and their receiving core is young and growing in Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Jalen Reed. Green Bay is legit. They're not a team to sneeze at, and they're just doing what they've been doing. They get a quarterback, they let him move on to the New York Jets, and then they just do it again. They did it with Favre, and they did it with Rodgers. So Jet fans, in about 12 years' time, Jordan Love's going to be a New York Jet. Let's go to the Vikings, a team that had high expectations coming into the season. Their defense was porous the year before, much better this season. Unfortunately for them, Kirk Cousins had a season-ending injury, and their season basically ended when he got hurt. Justin Jefferson also was injured some of the season. Remember, they cut Dalvin Cook. He signed with the Jets. Now he's with the Ravens. Alexander Mattison did not work out for them this year at running back. We know Jordan Addison is a special receiver. They signed TJ Hockenson, but he tore his ACL. Big question for me with Minnesota is really simple. Is Kirk Cousins the guy that you want to re-sign? Do you want to re-sign him for 1 or 2 years, or do you want to re-sign him for 4 or 5? Kirk Cousins has come out and said he's willing to take a hometown discount, and structure is a big thing for him. I fully expect Kirk Cousins to be back in Minnesota next year as the quarterback with Justin Jefferson, and the Vikings will run it back with Kevin O'Connell as the head coach. Then there's the Chicago Bears, the team that everybody's talking about. They have the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft because Carolina traded it as part of the Bryce Young deal. The big question remains, will they take Caleb Williams number 1, or will they take somebody else and Justin Fields becomes the franchise QB for the next few years? The reality is simple. They need a quarterback. Justin Fields played well the last 6 or 7 games, but the Bears are not good. They're not good. Now, they did fire their offensive coordinator. Their defense was really good once Matt Eberflus took over, and he is expected to come back as head coach. We know they can run the ball. They always have. And they have some good talent at receiver. I still think if I'm Ryan Poles and the Bears, I'm taking Caleb Williams and I'm trading Justin Fields to Atlanta. While Justin Fields may work out somewhere else, I think a lot of his issue was coaching, and I think now another part of his issue is he's not a winning quarterback. He is 10-27 in 37 games. That's not very good. I don't care what kind of talent you have. To me, Caleb Williams is the answer, and when he wins 12 games next year and the Bears are in the playoffs, everyone's going to forget about Justin Fields. Now, let's go to the NFC South. It's one of the worst divisions I've ever seen. We'll start with the winners, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Didn't think I'd be saying that in January. Baker Mayfield had a hell of a year. Contract year and all. He found a way for the Bucs to get in. He was impressive. But I still wouldn't give him a long-term deal, because I think once he gets the long-term deal, he's going to regress back to what he was. I give credit to Todd Bowles, but mostly to Dave Canales, their offensive coordinator. He's a guy that should absolutely be considered for head coaching jobs because of the job he did with Baker. Todd Bowles gets credit for the defense with guys like Devin White and Antoine Winfield Jr., guys who are part of the Super Bowl run with Tom Brady. They still have Mike Evans for this year. He'll probably leave. And they still have Chris Godwin. Now they host a playoff game. They host Philadelphia tonight. Then there's the New Orleans Saints. A disappointing season for them. A lot of people picked them to win the division. It was a soft schedule for them. Derek Carr was injured a lot throughout the season. Also got in a fight with his offensive line. Alvin Kamara was suspended 3 games into the season. So that didn't help. Michael Thomas couldn't stay on the field. Chris Olave dealt with injuries as well. To me, the Saints got off on the wrong foot from the beginning as they had no continuity in their offense. And I think in order for them to win the division next year, they need everybody on the field. As for their defense, it was legit. Dennis Allen is a defensive coach, and we knew that. And now their defense has to continue their trend into next year. The only issue I still have with the Saints is they need to cut Jameis Winston after that incident that happened in the Falcons game when Jamal Williams scored a touchdown and Jameis basically told Dennis Allen they weren't taking a knee. Kind of showed me that maybe Dennis Allen has no control over his players. Jameis made him look like a fool, but the real fool is Jameis Winston. Then there's Atlanta, right? A team that had high expectations. People thought they could make the playoffs. But Arthur Smith, the last 2 years, believed in Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder. Didn't work out for him, and now he's out of a job. 7-10, 3 consecutive years, and just a disaster for Atlanta. Now Arthur Blank is searching again for another coach. There were rumors he was in on Belichick. Belichick is not going to Atlanta. So now the rumor is Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams, is in the lead. I don't like that hire. He was in Tampa Bay and it didn't work. I wouldn't expect it to work here either. They need a quarterback. We know Ritter's not the answer, and we know Taylor Heineke's just a backup. I would fully expect them to be aggressive for Justin Fields, and we'll see. They have elite offensive weapons in Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson. 3 guys who've basically underperformed due to play calling and lack of QB play. The Falcons are missing the most important thing in football, the head coach-quarterback combination. If they can find it this offseason, I like their chances of being competitive next year. And then there's the lowly Carolina Panthers. Their owner thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, but he might be the dumbest. Dave Tepper struggles continue. There were rumors that he wanted Bryce Young, and Frank Reich and the GM wanted CJ Stroud. They went with Bryce Young because the owner said, I'm the owner, I'm going to use my power. And now he looks like a total fool, and might have set this franchise back a long, long time. Quarterbacks develop in multiple ways, from the offensive coordinator to the QB coach to the head coach. Bryce Young was screwed from the beginning. He really had nothing to work with. He had no talent around him. His O-line was terrible. Miles Sanders is an injury-prone running back, and Adam Thielen on a Super Bowl team is a number 2 receiver. Their defense has some pieces. Jeremy Chin, Derek Brown, and Brian Burns. They have defense. Their defense is there, but they have zero offensive capability right now. The new GM that comes in is going to have to acquire talent fast. They don't have a first-round pick because they traded it to Chicago. I have to wonder if they're thinking about moving some guys just to get draft capital and start over. But I'll tell you this, it's the least attractive job in the league. Because if the owner's going to hire people and just make the decisions for them, nobody's going to want these jobs. So this owner's going to have to relinquish some power, and he's going to have to allow these people that he's hired to do their jobs. Now, NFC West, last division. San Francisco runs that division. They win it again with Brock Purdy, a potential MVP candidate, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle. We know their offense and defense are special, but they're not immune to injuries either. Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey both dealing with injuries right now. We'll see how healthy they are when they play Green Bay next weekend. As for the Los Angeles Rams, it was another team in rebuild. Their defense was really young. They didn't know who their running back was, but Kyren Williams came out of nowhere and proved that he's the number 1 guy in LA. Stafford looked like his old self. Cooper Kupp is special, as we know, and Puka Nacua would have won Rookie of the Year if it wasn't for CJ Stroud. Unfortunately, Tyler Higbee tore his ACL in the Lions game last night, but I give the Rams a lot of credit. Sean McVay's a heck of a coach, one of the greatest to ever do it. He got them into the playoffs. He absolutely deserves Coach of the Year consideration. Now Seattle, a team that had borderline playoff expectations. We knew they were going to be in the mix for a wild card spot. But they kind of hit a rut middle of the year. Geno got hurt. Drew Lock played well in his absence. But still, you need that quarterback at the end of the day. They have offensive talent in Metcalf, Lockett, Charbonnet, and Kenneth Walker. Their defense, led by Witherspoon, is special. He is the only special talent, though, that they have. Their defense lacks talent. They need to get rid of Jamal Adams, and they need to get some veterans on that defense, and I think Seattle is close. The other decision they have to make is if Geno Smith can really get them to a Super Bowl, which I don't think he can. And then the Pete Carroll decision, which shocked the NFL, that he was no longer head coach. I think it was the same as New England. They believe these old-timers are not with the times anymore. They're old-school guys, and they want new ways of creative thinking. Pete Carroll is a defensive guy, and their defense was terrible this year. We'll have to see how the new head coach comes in and addresses things. I think the job is either Dan Quinn's or Mike Vrabel's. I personally would hire Vrabel over Quinn after that debacle in Dallas last night. But we'll see what John Schneider and Seattle decide to do. As for Arizona, it was a team in total rebuild. Kyler Murray missed part of the year because of his ACL tear from last year. James Conner's a solid running back, and Hollywood Brown and Trey McBride have kind of emerged. Now they have a chance to take Marvin Harrison Jr. with their pick and give Kyler Murray an elite weapon. And then all of a sudden, Arizona has cap space. They start signing players, and maybe Jonathan Gannon will have himself a better year. So, the NFC looked like this. The division winners were Dallas, Detroit, Tampa Bay, and San Francisco. The 3 wildcard spots, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Green Bay Packers. So now we get to this weekend's divisional games. I'll leave Dallas Green Bay for last because that's a game that we could talk about for 2 hours. I'll start with the game tonight, Tampa and Philadelphia. The game is in Tampa. Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles have lost 5 of 6, and they look completely broken, fractured, whatever word you want to use. Sirianni likely out of a job if they lose this game. And I could see Dallas and Philly both fighting for Belichick. At the end of the day, Philadelphia is the more talented team. But Tampa Bay, even though they only won 9-0 against Carolina, Baker makes his money in these moments. If you want to make big money, big contracts, you got to do it in the playoffs. Baker knows what's on the line tonight. There's nothing on the line for the Eagles, just their reputation. Like, Jalen Hurts is still going to be their quarterback. They're still going to have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. But Baker Mayfield potentially could be playing for more money if he wins this game. Give me the Bucs at home to pull off the upset. Even though it's not a seed upset, it's a talent upset. And I think Sirianni's out of a job in Philly. Now, the other game was the Rams and the Lions. Great game last night. Jared Goff versus Matt Stafford, both playing against their former teams. Both were drafted number 1 overall by those teams. This game was special for both of those quarterbacks, but I hated the way Stafford handled the postgame. A reporter asked him what he thought about how he was happy for Detroit, and he said, "I'm only happy for the players." They drafted you, dude. They drafted you. They thought you were the guy, and you weren't the guy. You were the guy for LA, but you weren't the guy in Detroit. The fact that you threw that city and that fan base under the bus tells me all I need to know. I would never, ever want you as my quarterback if you trash your city like that. Now, I'm happy for Jared Goff. Got an opportunity, took advantage of it, and now the Lions get to host a second playoff game, playing the winner of Tampa-Philly. I really like Detroit's chances of going back to the Super Bowl. Yes, San Francisco would be difficult, and yes, it would be on the road. But Jared Goff is familiar with the 49ers, remember, when he was with the Rams. He understands their ins and outs, and Detroit would be extremely motivated. I think the Lions have a real shot to get there, but of course, it'll have to go through San Francisco. Now let's talk about the game everybody's talking about. Dallas and Green Bay. The Packers were up 27-7 at the half and absolutely annihilated Dallas, 48-32. The score was a lot closer than the game was. The game was a blowout. It was done by halftime. Dallas choked. They were nervous, playing on edge. And Green Bay played loose, and had nothing to lose in this game. Jordan Love looked like a superstar, and Dak completely shat himself. At the end of the day, Green Bay was the more prepared team, the better coached team, and it looks like the more talented team. Micah Parsons played the worst game of his career, the Lawrence Taylor of this generation. I think, once again, we can pump the brakes on that. As for Dallas's defense, the rest of them, they didn't show up. And I think it's because Dan Quinn might have already halfway been on his way out. We'll see. Maybe Dan Quinn gets the coaching job in Dallas. I doubt it. I think he comes down to Seattle or Tennessee. Mike McCarthy is done in Dallas. I don't see how they keep him. Now, Jerry Jones came out and said he was shocked, surprised, whatever. At the end of the day, Jerry Jones is the face of the Cowboys. It's not about the players. It's not about the coaching staff. It's about Jerry Jones. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Dallas is not winning a Super Bowl as long as Jerry Jones is the owner. He wants to be the center of attention. If you watch the postgame last night on Fox, they did a fabulous job. But if you watch it, you'll see that there were probably 50 to 100 cameras around Jerry Jones. The owner shouldn't be the center of attention. The center of attention should be on Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy. But it was on Jerry Jones and his decision on whether or not he's going to keep McCarthy and go for Belichick. At the end of the day, he's just like the rest of them. He wants to be the center of attention, wants to be on the back of the paper, and as long as you have an owner like that, you're not going to be a successful team. Look at all the teams that have won. Those owners have mostly stayed out of the limelight. In Dallas, it just looks like a Broadway show at this point. Dallas should be embarrassed for the way they played, and Dak came out and said he should be on the hot seat too. He's 100% right. If I'm Dallas, I think you have to consider moving Dak. And if I'm a head coaching candidate, I'm not even sure this is an attractive job. Your owner's the center of attention. You basically have no say in personnel. And he believes in Dak. And Dak pooped himself multiple years on this stage. I'm not sure that Dak can lead a team to a Super Bowl. Yes, he's talented. And yes, he had a great season this year. But when it mattered most, he choked. And he was nervous and played tight. And you can't do that in Dallas. Now if they hire Belichick, the pressure gets even tighter. It gets higher. Dallas will be Super Bowl or bust. And guess what? If Belichick comes in, he's never getting fired. So that means they'd have to change Dak. And we know Belichick is not good at picking personnel. We've seen that last year. I don't expect Tom Brady to come out of retirement, put on a Dallas Cowboy uniform, and win a Super Bowl for Dallas. He's done. I don't expect Gronk to come back and save Dallas. It's not happening. At the end of the day, Dallas should be embarrassed. We'll see what they do. Jerry Jones will take his time, I'm sure. But if I were him, I'd get Belichick on line one, fly the private jet to his residence, and make sure that you sign a deal before he goes to Philly or somewhere else. I understand Dak and CeeDee Lamb had career years, and that's great. But when it mattered most, it didn't happen. As for the Packers, I give Matt LaFleur a lot of credit, but he almost choked the game to Dallas at the end. It was a 16-point game with a minute and a half left, and Dak almost threw a touchdown that would have cut it to 10 with a 2-point conversion on the line. Matt LaFleur does not know how to handle end-of-game situations, but he's got a superstar in Jordan Love, who I was dead wrong on. They have elite receivers, their defense is playing better, and the Packers are getting hot at the right time. Now they have a chance going to San Francisco next week to now pull off two major upsets and be kind of the sleeper team, per se, in the NFC. Matt LaFleur will absolutely get Coach of the Year votes, but at the end of the day, he probably won't win it. But I think Green Bay found one thing out, and that's that they have an elite star once again at quarterback in Jordan Love. So that does it for this episode of Straight Up Sports, the podcast. I appreciate you all listening. I apologize for the light over my left shoulder. It's kind of going on and off. It's a timer light. I can't control it. I'll post another episode soon. Again, I can't guarantee you when it's going to happen. But I appreciate you all listening. It means a lot. Like and subscribe. Share with all your friends. And we'll talk again soon.